Chapter 1. The silence was louder. I remember when silence became louder than a scream. When you lose a child and then your husband, not always in that order, the world doesn't just change, it shrinks. It tightens around your chest like a wire. Even the air starts to feel foreign. My name is Claire Walker. I'm 30, and I forgot how to be a woman. Leaving Chicago wasn't a sudden decision. I had been preparing myself for months. The final straw wasn't some dramatic moment. It was a mirror. One morning, I looked up from the sink and saw a stranger staring back at me, pale, hollow-eyed, with a kind of emptiness that no amount of makeup or fake laughter could hide. So I packed a few boxes, sold what I didn't need, turned off my phone, and left. No plan, no destination, really. Just a memory of a sleepy coastal town in Maine where I used to spend summers with my grandmother. I must have been 6. I remember pine trees, salt on my lips, and the sound of her humming while it rained outside. It was the only place that ever felt safe. I didn't even know if it still existed the way I remembered it, but I needed to find out if I still existed. Chapter 2. A house that still remembers me. The house was still there. Faded white siding, a wraparound porch with chipped paint, and a wind chime that barely moved even in the sea breeze. It looked smaller than I remembered, but don't all childhood places? I stood on the porch, holding the key the real estate agent mailed me after I bought the place online, sight unseen. Stupid, maybe, but it was all I could do to keep from sinking completely. The door creaked open. The scent hit me like a wave, salt, wood, and something faintly floral, like her lavender soap. My grandmother had been gone for over a decade, but her memory clung to the walls like dust in the sun. Inside, it was mostly empty. The previous tenants had left a few pieces of mismatched furniture, a rocking chair by the window, a bookshelf missing its middle shelf. But it wasn't the furniture that caught me. It was the quiet. No horns, no neighbors yelling, no sirens, just the sea humming gently in the background, and the occasional cry of a gull. I spent that first night curled up on a mattress on the floor, wrapped in 2 blankets, staring at the ceiling fan turning in slow, uneven circles. I didn't cry. Not then, not yet. I think my grief had calcified into something heavier, something beyond tears. Chapter 3. The Man at the Market. The next morning, I walked to the local market just down the road. It was small, wooden framed, with chalkboard signs and baskets of oranges that looked too perfect to be real. The woman behind the counter smiled like she knew every secret I was trying to keep. "You're new?" she said, handing me a paper bag. "Is it that obvious?" I smiled, tired. "You've got that look," she nodded, the I ran from something big look. I gave her a polite laugh, not knowing what else to say. That's when I saw him. In the corner by the fresh herbs, lean with rolled-up sleeves, a paint-smeared t-shirt, and that absent-minded quiet focus that artists wear like armor. He looked up for just a second. Our eyes met. Nothing dramatic, no thunderclap, no slow motion. Just a moment, but I felt it. Like a breath I didn't know I was holding. He didn't smile, didn't nod. Just turned back to the rosemary and basil, grabbed a bunch, and disappeared before I reached the register. Later, the cashier said, "That's Ethan Rhodes, lives near the cliffs. Doesn't talk much, but he's kind." I didn't ask more, but I would learn, eventually. Because some people don't need to speak loudly to leave a mark. Some just look at you once, and something shifts. Chapter 4. The Sound of His Silence. It started with the window. The first fall storm rolled in with little warning. I was sitting on the floor with a cup of tea and a half-read book when the wind howled and the front window creaked loudly. One of the hinges had come loose, and now the glass threatened to shatter with each gust. I didn't panic, but I felt helpless. I hadn't yet met any neighbors. I had no tools, no idea how to fix anything, and I hated how that made me feel, small, incapable, dependent. Then someone knocked. I opened the door, and there he was, Ethan. Same quiet eyes, same paint-stained shirt, hair wet from the rain. He looked down at my feet, then at the trembling window behind me. "You need help," he said simply. I didn't know whether to be grateful or embarrassed, but I stepped aside, and he walked in without hesitation. He moved like someone used to silence. No wasted words, no unnecessary motion. He pulled a small toolkit from his bag, examined the window, then got to work. For the first few minutes, neither of us spoke. The only sounds were the clicking of tools and the soft drum of rain on the roof. Then he surprised me. "You from Chicago?" I blinked. "Yeah. How'd you know?" He kept working. "The plate's on your car." "Right." I smiled faintly. I guess I still carry the city with me. He glanced over his shoulder. "Not a bad thing, unless it's something you're trying to forget." I didn't answer. After he fixed the hinge, he tested it, nodded once, and said, "That'll hold." Then he stood there like he was waiting for something, or like he wasn't sure if he should go. So I did something strange, even for me. "Would you like some tea?" I asked. He hesitated for a second, then nodded. We sat at the small kitchen table, one mug between us because I'd only unpacked one. He didn't mind, just waited for me to pour and handed it back gently. His hands were strong, not smooth, not soft. Hands that had built things, painted pain into form. I wanted to ask 100 questions. Why he was so quiet. Why he looked like he'd lived 5 lives already. But I didn't. I just watched him take small, careful sips, like the tea might judge him if he spilled it. After a while, he looked up, right at me. "You're not running," he said. "You're healing. That's harder." The words struck something deep. I didn't know if I was healing. Some days I didn't even know if I was breathing. But he said it with such certainty, it made me believe it was possible. And that night, after he left, I sat on my porch long after the rain had stopped, thinking about the way his voice sounded in the quiet, like it belonged there, like maybe he did too. Chapter 5, Salt and Paint. I wasn't planning to see him again so soon, but the next afternoon while walking along the cliffside trail behind the town's library, I spotted a splash of color tucked between the trees, a weathered shed with sea-worn shingles, and 2 large windows facing the ocean. The door was slightly ajar. Curiosity, or maybe something deeper, pulled me closer. Inside, the air smelled of turpentine, salt, and something raw, like emotion that hadn't yet found its name. The walls were lined with canvases, some half-finished, others turned toward the wall like secrets he wasn't ready to share. And there he was, Ethan. He didn't flinch when he saw me, just looked up from his easel, a streak of crimson paint across his cheek like war paint. "You found it," he said, without surprise. I should have apologized, backed away. But I didn't. I stepped inside, slowly, letting the space speak first. "It's beautiful," I said softly, my eyes scanning the canvases. "Messy," he corrected, like most honest things. He didn't offer me a tour, just stepped aside so I could see what he was working on. A painting of the sea, but not like any I'd ever seen. The waves weren't blue. They were streaked in ash gray, deep plum, and violent strokes of red. The sky was fractured like glass. And in the center, a woman stood at the edge of the rocks, her face tilted to the wind, eyes closed. She looked like me. My breath caught. "Is that..." He nodded once, from memory. I didn't think I'd left that strong an impression. "You didn't," he said. Then added, "Not on my mind." But my hands remembered. Silence. I didn't know what to say. I felt exposed and seen in the same moment. The painting wasn't flattering. It wasn't romantic. It was honest. It showed the ache I carried, the storm still in my eyes. "I should go," I whispered, half turning. He reached for my wrist, lightly, just enough to stop me. "Don't." The air between us changed, thickened. He let go, and I stayed. Ethan picked up a brush but didn't paint. He said, "I don't usually let people in here." "Why me?" He glanced at me, then back at the canvas. Because you don't flinch at pain. You wear it like armor. That night, I lay in bed thinking of his words, of the way his studio smelled, of the ghost of his fingers on my wrist. Something inside me had shifted, and for the first time in years, I didn't want to run. Chapter 6. His hands, my skin. It didn't happen like in the movies. There was no dramatic kiss in the rain, no gasping declarations. It was slower, quieter, like a tide that had been pulling us in all along. He came by the next evening. No warning, just a knock on the door and that same stillness behind his eyes. The sky outside was melting into pink, the kind of color that makes you ache without knowing why. "I brought you something," he said. A canvas, wrapped in brown paper. He didn't come in right away, just stood on the porch, waiting for me to decide. I stepped aside and he walked in with the quiet of someone who knows how to respect a broken place. We sat on the couch. I unwrapped the canvas. It was me, again. But this time, I was sitting in a chair by the window, light falling across my collarbone, hands curled around a steaming mug. My face wasn't beautiful in the traditional sense. I looked tired, raw, but peaceful. "You painted me like I survived," I said, not realizing my voice had gone hoarse. He looked down at his hands. "Because you did." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was electric, thick with everything we hadn't said. He touched my hand then, not tentative, not timid, just real, like he meant it. His thumb brushed across my palm, and I swear my whole body stilled. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. It broke something in me the way he asked, not assuming, not expecting, just giving me the choice. "Yes," I whispered, and then he did. It wasn't soft, it wasn't hesitant. It was a kiss that knew pain, that had tasted loss. His mouth moved like he'd waited years for it, and mine opened like I'd forgotten I still knew how to feel. We didn't make it to the bedroom. We undressed each other slowly in the living room, the world falling away with every button, every breath. His hands moved over me like he was learning a language he'd once forgotten. He kissed every scar, visible and invisible. And when we finally lay together, it wasn't about need. It was about recognition. His body was warm, solid, and trembling slightly against mine. I curled into him, into the safety he didn't even know he offered. Our movements were tender and sharp, desperate and reverent all at once. It wasn't perfect. It was real. After, he didn't speak. He just lay beside me, tracing circles on my hip with his fingertips, as if to remind himself that I was still there. I watched the ceiling fan spin and thought, so this is what it feels like. Not to be touched, but to be known. I didn't say it out loud, but a part of me knew. This was the beginning of something, and I wasn't afraid. Chapter 7. Ghosts That Don't Knock. I woke up before dawn. Ethan was still beside me, one arm draped across my stomach, his breath slow and deep. The weight of his body was grounding, like a reminder I hadn't imagined the night before. But my mind had already started to drift. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him, and padded to the kitchen for water. The sky was still dark, and the silence inside the house felt heavier than usual. Not uncomfortable, just full. Full of everything we'd shared, everything we hadn't yet said. I was halfway through my glass when I saw the blinking light on my phone. A voicemail, unknown number. My chest tightened. I pressed play. "Claire, it's James." The sound of his voice was like being pulled back into deep water. My ex-husband's voice. Calm, controlled. Always too calm, like he never really felt anything. "I heard you left the city. I should have called earlier. I didn't know what to say. I just wanted to tell you. I think about her too. Every day. Her, our daughter." My throat tightened. I listened to the rest of the message, but I couldn't focus. It felt like the floor had shifted beneath me. I hadn't heard from James in almost a year. After the divorce, he'd vanished from my life like she never existed between us. I stared at the phone. Part of me wanted to throw it across the room. Another part wanted to call him back and scream. But instead I went outside. The air was cold. My skin prickled. I sat on the porch steps, my knees pulled up to my chest, and let myself cry, quietly, the way I'd learned to. The tears weren't for James. They were for her, for the baby we never got to hold, for the woman I'd become in her absence. Behind me, the screen door creaked open. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. Ethan sat beside me without a word. He didn't ask what happened. He just offered me warmth, his hand wrapping around mine. I wanted to stay there, to pretend the message didn't exist. But I knew it had stirred something I couldn't ignore. He called, I whispered. Ethan said nothing, but I felt him tense beside me. My ex, I added. He left a message about her. Silence. Then, do you want to go back? I turned to look at him, startled. What? Back to that life? To the place you ran from? I shook my head slowly. No, but that doesn't mean it's not still in me. His gaze softened. Some ghosts don't knock. They just walk in. We sat in silence for a long time after that, and I realized something then. Ethan wasn't afraid of my pain. He didn't flinch from it. He sat with it, carried it with me, and that somehow made the weight a little easier to bear. Chapter 8. The Cliff Between Us. A week passed. We settled into something that felt like rhythm. Ethan came by most evenings, sometimes with a bottle of wine, sometimes with paint on his hands. I cooked more, laughed more, slept without waking from nightmares, but I knew it couldn't last forever. Some nights he'd drift off mid-sentence. I'd ask about his past and he'd change the subject. I could feel it. There was something he hadn't told me, a shadow he kept tucked just beyond my reach. One morning, I found him down by the water. He stood at the edge of the cliffs, staring out at the sea like it owed him something. The wind was harsh, biting, and the waves below were violent, crashing again and again like they wanted to swallow the shore whole. I walked up behind him and said his name. He didn't turn. She was pregnant, he said quietly. I stopped. Her name was Anna. We weren't together long, just enough to believe we could start over. I was going to propose. I moved closer. His hands were clenched into fists. She died in a car crash. 3 years ago, she was driving to meet me. I was late. My breath hitched. I blamed myself, he continued. Still do. I stopped painting for a year. Couldn't hold a brush. Couldn't touch anyone. He finally looked at me. His eyes weren't dry. You're the first person I've let in since her. I wanted to reach for him, to say something that could break the weight of those years. But I just whispered, I'm so sorry. He looked back at the water. Sometimes I come here and wonder what would have happened if I'd been on time, if I'd taken a different road. You can't live in that what if, I said, barely audible, or it will eat you alive. He turned then, finally, and something cracked in his expression, like a wall buckling under too much pressure. I don't know how to let go, he whispered. I stepped toward him and placed his hand over my heart. Then don't let go alone. We stood there, two people shaped by grief, carried by guilt, tethered by something fragile but real. It wasn't a moment of healing. It was a moment of choosing to stay, choosing to try. Even with the past screaming behind us and the sea raging below, we stood together, and that was something. Chapter 9. First Snow. The first snow came early that year. It blanketed the little town like a hush, turning rooftops white and muffling every sound. I watched it fall from the front window, wrapped in Ethan's sweater, a mug of tea warming my hands. Something about snow always made me feel like a child again, both wonderstruck and lonely. Ethan arrived just after dusk, stomping snow from his boots, cheeks flushed red from the cold. He shook off the frost, and I laughed. You look like a man who fought the storm and lost. I fought it and won, he said with a grin, holding up a paper bag. Cinnamon rolls. He kissed my cheek. That was new. Casual affection, light and easy. And yet it stirred something deep in me. Not fear, not lust. Something quieter, safer, dangerous in its softness. We ate on the couch, candles flickering. the smell of cinnamon mixing with the wood smoke from the fireplace. Outside, the town was still, no cars, no voices, just the endless falling of white. After a while, he said, "I've been thinking about staying." I turned. Staying. Here, with you. The world paused. He looked down, like the weight of those words had exhausted him. "The studio's good for me. You're good for me. I don't want to run anymore." I felt my throat tighten. "I want that too," I said softly. "But I need to know you're not saying it just because it's snowing and the world feels clean." He met my eyes. "I'm saying it because every time I leave, I feel like I forget how to breathe. And when I'm with you, even the heavy stuff feels lighter." Silence stretched between us. Then I whispered, "I'm still scared." He moved closer. "Me too." We held each other like that for a long time, two scarred people learning to dream again. That night we made love slow and tender, not like before. This time it wasn't about escaping. It was about choosing to stay, to trust, to let hope sneak in. The snow kept falling, and for the first time in years I slept through the night. Chapter 10. Letters We Never Sent. The letter came a few days before Christmas. No return address, no stamp, just my name on the envelope, written in a familiar slanted hand I hadn't seen in over a year. "James." I stood at the mailbox for a long time, the cold biting through my coat. Ethan was inside, making coffee and humming softly to some jazz record I found in town. The warmth of that life, our life, waited for me behind the front door, but my hands shook as I opened the letter. "Claire, I don't know if I have the right to write this. Maybe I lost that when I let you go without a fight. Maybe I never had it. I think about her every day, about the name we chose, about how you used to fall asleep with your hand on your belly, whispering stories to someone we never got to meet. I was angry, at you, at myself, at the universe for taking her, and I buried that anger in silence. I thought I was protecting us, but all I did was walk away. I'm sorry. You were always braver than me. You faced it. I ran. I heard you left the city. I hope you found peace, maybe even love again. You deserve it. If you ever want to talk, I'll be here. Waiting is all I know how to do now. James." I read it 3 times. The words didn't burn. They didn't even sting. But they left an ache. A soft, dull one, like pressing on a bruise that never really healed. I stood in the kitchen doorway, still holding the letter, when Ethan turned and smiled. Then his smile faded. "What is it?" he asked. "From James," I said. He nodded slowly. "You okay?" I wanted to lie, to bury it, but I couldn't. "I don't know." He looked down, then poured my coffee, set it in front of me like an offering. "Want to talk about it?" I looked at him, at the man who had held me while I grieved, who kissed my scars like they were sacred, who waited without asking. "He was a part of me," I said, "but he's not the rest of me." Ethan met my eyes, steady and quiet. "You don't owe me anything, Claire, except honesty. I held up the letter. "This doesn't make me question you. It just reminds me that part of me still lives with what I lost." He reached out and covered my hand. "We both do." I swallowed hard. "You're not going to ask me to throw it away?" He shook his head. "No, because who we've been matters. But it doesn't have to decide who we become." Tears welled up. I leaned forward, pressed my forehead to his. "Thank you," I whispered. Outside, snow began to fall again, and for the first time I realized I didn't have to choose between the past and the future. I could carry both, just not alone. Chapter 11. Winter Fires. Christmas came quietly in the seaside town. There were no malls, no traffic jams, no blinking neon. Just candlelight in windows, soft choral music from the local chapel, and the salty wind whispering through the evergreens. It was the kind of place where time softened, where the past didn't press quite so hard against your chest. Ethan and I decorated a crooked little pine tree we bought from the market. Its branches stuck out awkwardly, its needles already falling. But it felt right, imperfect, real, just like us. We strung lights, hung wooden ornaments I found in an antique shop, and tied ribbons around tangerines like my grandmother used to. Ethan hummed as he worked, occasionally brushing his hand against mine without meaning to. Or maybe he meant to. Either way, I didn't pull away. That night, we lit the fireplace and curled under a shared blanket, our legs tangled, his head on my shoulder. "I used to love Christmas," he said softly. Before the world got loud, I ran my fingers through his hair. "I know what you mean. I didn't decorate for years," he continued. "Didn't even bother with lights. Just let the day pass like any other." I felt his breath against my collarbone. "And now?" He shifted, his gaze meeting mine. "Now I want this moment to last." Something bloomed in my chest. Not fireworks, not adrenaline, just warmth, quiet and steady. The kind that stays. We talked for hours about silly Christmas memories, about the way grief steals holidays, about the slow return of joy. And when the fire burned low, he kissed me. Gently. Not like a question this time, but like a promise. That night we made love slowly, reverently. There was no rush, no edge of desperation, just touch and breath and the kind of silence that means something. Afterward, we lay in the flickering dark, and I whispered, "I think I'm falling in love with you." He didn't flinch. He just pulled me closer and said, "I already did." And in that moment, I didn't feel broken anymore. Chapter 12, Tides That Return. The knock on the door came early, just as the sky turned pink with morning. Ethan was still in bed, tangled in sheets and dreams, when I slipped quietly down the stairs to answer it. The woman standing on the porch didn't flinch at the cold. She had dark eyes, a thin face, and the kind of stillness that made you nervous. She looked like someone who knew how to wait. "Can I help you?" I asked, pulling my robe tighter. "I'm looking for Ethan Hart." I hesitated. "Who's asking?" She offered a faint, practiced smile. "His sister." I blinked. He had never mentioned a sister. Before I could speak again, I heard his voice behind me. "Em?" I turned. Ethan was at the top of the stairs, barefoot, confused, already pale. "What are you doing here?" "I didn't know where else to go," she said. "It's Mom. She's dying." The room turned cold. She stepped forward, but he didn't move. "I thought you should know," she added softly. He nodded, then looked at me. "Claire, this is Emma." I gave her a polite nod. My heart was pounding. She glanced around the house. "You live here now?" Ethan's voice was dry. "I do. I didn't know you could stay in one place long enough to unpack." That one landed. He didn't answer. Finally, I cleared my throat. "Would you like some coffee?" Emma shook her head. "No, thanks. I just needed to deliver the message." She turned to go, but Ethan stopped her. "When?" "Couple of days, maybe. The hospital's in Portland." After she left, the silence in the room felt heavier than before. "You never told me you had a sister," I said. "I never told her about you either." I waited. "She's not the enemy," he added. "But she's part of the life I tried to leave behind. After Natalie, after everything, I stopped talking to them." "Why?" He exhaled. "Because they wanted me to move on too fast? Because they didn't understand the weight I was carrying. Or maybe I just didn't give them the chance." I reached for his hand. "Do you want to go?" He looked at me, and I could see the war inside him. "I don't know. Then we'll figure it out. Together." He pulled me into his arms, burying his face in my neck. "I'm scared. So am I. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." Chapter 13. The Goodbye We Owed. We left for Portland on the 26th. The drive was quiet, the sky stretched low and gray above us. Ethan kept one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting near mine on the console, but not touching. His silence wasn't cold, it was bracing, like a wave pulling back before it crashes. He hadn't been back in over 3 years. The last time was Natalie's funeral. Now he was returning to say goodbye again, this time to his mother. I didn't ask questions. I let him breathe. When we arrived at the hospital, Emma was waiting in the lobby. She looked tired, her arms crossed tight across her chest. "She's asking for you," she said. Ethan nodded, then turned to me. Wait here? No, I said gently. You shouldn't walk into this alone. The room was small, filled with the soft beeps of machines and the sterile scent of sickness. His mother looked older than I imagined, pale skin, fragile hands. But her eyes were sharp, focused, still fighting. When she saw him, they welled with tears. Oh, Ethan. He stepped forward slowly, like the ground beneath him might collapse. I'm here, he said. His voice cracked. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. He held her hand, kissed her forehead, and whispered something I didn't hear. She looked at me next. And you must be Claire. Yes, ma'am. Her smile was faint, but kind. Thank you for bringing him home. I didn't know what to say, so I just squeezed her hand. Sometimes love doesn't need words. We stayed 2 days. Emma and I shared coffee and long, quiet conversations on the hospital balcony. She wasn't the enemy, just someone who had also lost too much. On the second night, Ethan stood by his mother's bedside until the machine stopped. He didn't cry, but when we left, he gripped my hand so tightly I felt his pulse in my bones. He didn't let go until we reached the car. Chapter 14, After the Storm. We returned to the coast in silence. The road back from Portland felt longer, as if the weight of goodbye had stretched every mile. Ethan didn't speak for hours, not out of coldness, but exhaustion. His grief sat beside us like a third passenger. I let it. I didn't try to fix it. Some storms needed to pass on their own. It wasn't until we crossed the bridge into town that he spoke. She didn't want me at Natalie's funeral. His voice was raw, fragile. My mom said it would only make things worse, that I'd suffered enough. I glanced at him, but he kept his eyes on the road. But the truth is, I didn't go because I was ashamed. Ashamed of what? Of not saving her. Of running when she needed me the most. He pulled into the driveway, turned off the engine, and sat there, staring out at the sea. It was dark and restless, waves folding into each other like pages in a book too painful to read. She was so calm, he continued. Natalie. Even at the end. She used to say, "Don't mourn me too loudly. I'd hate to be the reason someone stops living." I reached for his hand. This time, he didn't hesitate. His fingers wrapped around mine, firm, steady. I never stopped hearing her voice, he whispered. Even when I met you. Especially then. Every time I laughed with you. Every time I touched you. I felt like I was betraying her. But you weren't, I said softly. You were finally listening to what she asked. He looked at me then. His eyes were red but clearer than I'd seen in days. I loved her, he said. But I love you too. Tears slid silently down my cheeks. I didn't wipe them away. Then stop punishing yourself for surviving, I said. We walked into the house together, slow and quiet. No grand declarations, no dramatic music, just the simple act of staying, of not walking away when it would have been easier. That night, we didn't make love. We held each other. He fell asleep with his head on my chest, breathing in sync with the ocean outside. And I watched him sleep, wondering when exactly grief had stopped being a cage and started becoming a bridge. Chapter 15. Low tide, soft light. The tide was low the next morning, the shoreline littered with seaweed and broken shells. I woke early, restless, and went for a walk alone. The town was still sleeping, wrapped in fog and quiet. When I returned to the cottage, there was a car parked outside, a black sedan with a California plate. I froze. I knew that car. I opened the front door cautiously, my heart knocking against my ribs. Ethan stood in the kitchen, a mug of coffee in his hand. His eyes flicked up to meet mine. "You have a visitor," he said quietly. The man stepped into view. Brown hair, older now, a faint beard. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes tired, but still sharp, still searching. David, my ex-husband, the man I had tried to forget. I didn't speak. Neither did he. Ethan placed the mug down and walked past us both, out the door, giving us space. David finally broke the silence. I heard about the baby. My knees buckled slightly. I leaned against the table, unsure if I was angry or just shattered all over again. "That was over a year ago," I said. I know, I didn't know how to say anything back then. You didn't try. I didn't know how, I scoffed. That's convenient. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck like he always did when cornered. I came to say I'm sorry, he said, and to ask if you're okay. I'm not, but I'm getting there. His eyes flicked toward the door Ethan had just exited. Is he helping? Yes. A long pause. I miss you, David said. I blinked. I don't, I answered. It wasn't cruel. It was true. I loved you, he whispered. Still do, maybe. I loved you too, I said. But then life happened. And you ran. I didn't know how to carry that kind of grief. Neither did I. But I didn't leave. He swallowed hard. I wish I had stayed. So do I. But that doesn't change anything now. The silence that followed was cleaner, less bitter, more final. He nodded slowly, as if absorbing a truth he'd been avoiding. I hope you find happiness, he said. I already have. When he left, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stood there and felt the soft weight of closure settle into my bones. Later, Ethan came back. He didn't ask questions. He just looked at me. You okay? I think I just let go of something I've been dragging behind me for years. He smiled gently. Feels lighter, doesn't it? I nodded. Like low tide. Everything ugly finally exposed, but ready to be swept away. He kissed me then, soft and slow, and in the fading light of that quiet afternoon, I felt something new take root. Peace. Chapter 16. The portrait he painted a few days passed. The world settled again. We slipped into soft rhythms, shared breakfasts, silent afternoons, warm evenings reading side by side. There was something sacred about the quiet between us, a space where nothing had to be perfect, only honest. One Sunday morning, Ethan seemed nervous. He barely touched his coffee, pacing the hallway as though waiting for a storm that hadn't yet arrived. What's going on? I asked. He hesitated. I want to show you something. He led me into the small studio at the back of the house. I'd been there before, seen canvases in progress, half-finished sketches, messy palettes. But one corner had always been covered by a white cloth. I'd never touched it. It felt like something private, untouchable. Today, he walked directly to it. I started this the week you moved here, he said, fingers gripping the cloth's edge. I didn't know your name then, just your posture. The way you walked alone down the beach that first evening. I froze. You painted me? He gave a small, almost shy smile, sort of. I painted what I saw in you. And then he pulled the cloth away. I gasped. It wasn't just a portrait. It was a feeling. A moment caught between light and shadow. Me, though not exactly. A woman sitting on the sand, arms wrapped around her knees, hair windblown, her face half turned toward the sea. Behind her, the storm clouds hung low, but the light broke through just above her head. It wasn't sad. It wasn't triumphant either. It was becoming. This is how I see you, he said softly. Not as someone broken, but someone still rising. I stepped closer, tears threatening but not falling. It's beautiful, I whispered. She looks like she survived something. She did. I turned to him. And you? He paused, then walked to the shelf, pulling out another canvas, smaller, rougher, unfinished. The same beach. A man standing at the water's edge, watching the horizon, waiting. That was me, he said. Before you, I stepped between the two paintings, looking at them side by side. Grief and hope, distance and closeness. Two people painted from memory, now standing in the same room. I looked at him. I think we were always meant to find each other. He smiled. Maybe we had to be lost first. We spent the rest of the morning in that studio, talking, touching, kissing with a slowness that felt earned. We weren't just bodies anymore. We were stories that had finally found a place to rest. Chapter 17, The Storm Breaks Again. It started with a phone call. We were in the kitchen making dinner, Ethan chopping rosemary, me stirring a pot of pasta, when his phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at the screen, and something in his expression shifted. He didn't answer, just silenced it and turned back to the herbs, his hands now trembling slightly. Who was it? I asked gently. He hesitated. My brother. I blinked. You never mentioned you had a brother. He exhaled through his nose. There's a reason. I waited. He's not a good man, Ethan said. He's the reason I left Portland after Natalie died. He borrowed money from some people, dangerous people, got me involved without telling me. And when things went south, I took the fall, paid off the debt with everything I had, cut ties, started over. The room felt suddenly colder. He needs something, I asked. He nodded. Probably. He wouldn't call unless he was desperate. Will you talk to him? I don't know. He didn't sleep that night. I could feel the tension radiating from his side of the bed like static. The past, heavy again, breathing down our necks. In the morning, I found him on the porch, cigarette in hand, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. I don't want to lose this, he said before I could even sit down. You, us. You won't, I replied. Not unless you run. He looked at me then, his eyes filled with that same fear I saw the day he gave me the locket. Fear of repeating the same story. Fear of hurting someone again. I'll meet him, he said at last. Just once, for closure. A few days later, we drove to a small diner outside Portland. Ethan spotted his brother before we even stepped inside. Lean, jittery, leaning against the hood of an old Chevy. The moment they locked eyes, I saw it. Guilt, resentment, buried affection. A lifetime of unspoken words. I stayed in the car. They talked for almost an hour. Through the windshield, I watched Ethan shift between anger and pain and something else I couldn't name. When he returned, he looked lighter, like something had finally been released. He's leaving the state, Ethan said quietly. I gave him just enough to start over. No more, no promises, just a door to walk through. Are you okay? No, he said, but I will be. That night, he held me tighter than ever, as if clinging to the only truth he trusted anymore. We didn't speak of the past again, not because we ignored it, but because we had finally stopped letting it define us. Chapter 18, Where the Light Finds Us. Autumn came slowly to the coast. The leaves along the cliffs turned golden rust, the sea lost its summer sparkle, and the air tasted of salt and goodbye. I'd been living in the town for nearly a year. One quiet morning, as I watched the waves roll in from the studio window, a letter arrived. Not an email, not a text. A real letter, addressed in looping cursive, from my old editor in Chicago. Claire, it read, I know you said you were done, but the city misses your eye. I miss your stories. If you ever want to return, there's a place here for you. A new section, your name on it. Think about it. I folded the letter and stared out at the ocean. My heart tightened. That version of me, the driven, polished city woman, I could still feel her, like a coat I once wore. One I took off when the weight became too much. That night, I told Ethan. He didn't say anything at first, just listened, eyes steady on mine. Do you want to go back? He asked softly. I don't know, I admitted. There's a part of me that's tempted, not because I miss it, but because it's safe, familiar. It's where the old me used to live. And what about the new you? I smiled faintly. She's still figuring things out. We went for a walk down by the water. The wind whipped at our faces. He stopped by the rocks, took my hands, and looked at me like I was the only truth he'd ever known. You don't owe the past anything, he said. Not even the version of you that once dreamed of something else. If you want to go, I won't stop you. I never want to be a cage. I touched his cheek. You're not a cage. You're the first place I've felt free. We stood there in silence, the ocean crashing behind us. I didn't need to speak. I already knew. The next morning, I wrote back to my editor. Thank you, truly. But my stories live somewhere else now. They live here, in brushstrokes and salt air, in a love I never saw coming. That same day, Ethan unveiled a new painting. It wasn't of me, it was of us. Two figures walking along a narrow path above the sea, hand in hand, backs to the viewer. The sky overhead was bursting with light. He titled it, Where the Light Finds Us. I stared at it, and then at him. I'm staying, I said. He didn't smile. He pulled me close and whispered, "I know." And just like that, everything felt whole again. Chapter 19, The Quiet of Enough. It didn't end in fireworks. There was no cinematic kiss in the rain, no dramatic chase through an airport, no last-minute revelations or grand confessions. It ended in quiet, in the soft ticking of the old clock in Ethan's studio, in the hum of the kettle on Sunday mornings, in the comfort of shared silence, of two people choosing each other every day without needing to say it aloud. A year passed, then another. We built a life not of extravagance, but of truth. I started a small writing workshop at the local library. Ethan's paintings were picked up by a gallery in San Francisco. We didn't talk about forever. We lived it, one soft breath at a time. Sometimes when I stood barefoot on the porch in the early evening, watching the tide pull in and out, I'd feel the ache of the past rise inside me like a tide of its own. But I no longer feared it. I let it wash over me. Because now I understood, pain is part of love's echo. It lingers, but it also softens. And in its place, something gentler grows. Hope. One night, after a particularly golden sunset, Ethan turned to me on the porch and said, "Do you ever wish things had happened differently?" I thought for a moment. "No," I answered, "not anymore. All the brokenness brought me here." He took my hand, kissed my wrist. To me, I nodded. To him, to this life, this quiet harbor after the storm. We never married, never felt the need. What we had was already sacred. Sometimes I still dream of the baby I lost. I see her in flashes, bare feet running along the shore, laughter like wind. She never speaks in the dreams, but she always turns to look at me with eyes that mirror mine. And in those dreams, I'm not sad. I'm whole because I loved and I lost. And I found love again. Not perfect, not painless, but real. And finally, enough